Hey, this is Matt once again. Welcome back to another video. Another paid request, this time from Mr. Leeman. Thank you so much for that. And for those interested in requesting any type of videos, topics, reactions, commentaries, reviews, re-reviews, what have you, feel free to send it either directly to my PayPal or join my Patreon. Both links are down below in the info box. Now, this is for it's Young Indiana Jones and the Phantom Train of Doom. The reason I hesitated is because it was a TV show, but at times they would take, I believe, 2 episodes and link them together and make a movie out of them, out of these 40, 50-minute episodes put together. In this case, it's 2 episodes that deal with Paul Freeman, who is Belloc in Raiders of the Lost Ark. He actually plays a different type of character. I believe a character that then became an inspiration for Alan Quartermain. I believe that's the case. Now, I did not watch much of the Indiana Jones TV show back in the day, the Young Indiana Jones Adventures or Chronicles, however you want to put it. I just didn't, because I'm like, without Harrison Ford, Indiana Jones just doesn't interest me. And sadly now, even with Harrison Ford, Indiana Jones doesn't interest me. So it's like, I'll just stay with the 4 movies. And I wouldn't say I was a big fan of this either. Meaning, I bet the new movie's going to suck, and I wasn't big on this. I didn't hate it, but I mean, Sean Patrick Flanery is fine as the young Indy. From what I understand on the show, there was more of an even younger Indiana Jones as a little kid, while this is, from what I understand, the TV show, there was like the old Indiana Jones played by a different actor. Although I think Harrison Ford was in 1 episode. But it's like a wraparound, whereas the old Indy then telling a story. And then at times it'd be a little kid. And then you have the older, played by Sean Patrick Flanery. Here it's just Sean Patrick Flanery. There's no beginning, end, wraparound, none of that. Which I do say would makes it a bit better, just a bit more consistent instead of going through all these different time spans of this is how he is as an old guy, this is how he is as a kid. So makes it more consistent. Now, this was actually directed by Peter McDonald, who did Rambo 3, and is written by Frank Darabont. And Frank Darabont, I mean, he helped write the Blah remake and Elm Street 3. He directed The Shawshank Redemption. He directed The Green Mile. A very commendable talent, Frank Darabont. So him writing this is definitely a good old gold star in his favor. So the plot is Indiana Jones as a teen around the World War I era, and his buddy Remy, which I will say, this guy Remy got on my nerves. He got on my nerves quite a bit. I thought he was really annoying. He's like, remember that guy in Ace Ventura, When Nature Calls, who hangs out with Ace Ventura, calls him for help? Reminds me of a more annoying version of that character. Like, that character worked in When Nature Calls. I didn't find him annoying. But I take that person, I forget the guy's name, give him a, he says Belgium accent, and just annoying, like a much more annoying, I don't know why, just the 2 of them just remind me look-wise. Just they're not the same personality-wise, or even accent-wise, or the same actor, just the way they look kind of was similar to me. But yeah, Remy was really annoying. Anyway, they get lost in Africa from their platoon, and they find an area with all these old guys, including Paul Freeman, and they are soldiers as well on a mission. In this case, there's a German train with a very giant cannon, and so the old guys go, if you want our help, you help us with this, because you said, Indy, that you know a lot about trains. So he leaves his buddy Remy there with all the other battalion getting shot at, and they're by a body of water. Well, Indy goes with these old guys. I would say the first part, which would have been, if these are 2 episodes put together, I would say episode 1 was better than episode 2. Just I thought the first half was a lot more interesting. Yeah, a little bit more interaction with all these older guys. And I wish you got to know a bit of these older guys. I wish you got to know a little bit more of Paul Freeman's character. You get to know a little bit, but not a whole lot. I mean, it was cool to see Paul Freeman. Although it makes it a bit weird in the continuity because we all know that's Belloc, and then he'll pop up a few years later in the Times continuity. But there's some decent production value. Like there's a part where they drive through a beach while it's at war and they're dodging explosions. There's a point where in the finale of that part, there's this train that disappears and they're wondering how it happened, and they follow these tables and they realize there's a fake hole in this mountain where the bad guys have hid the train. And when they escape, there's a bit of shootout. There's a bit where one character has to go on a tightrope to get from one disconnected car to the other. You get some practical real explosions. There's a bit where Paul Freeman gets a nice shot in and the whole thing explodes. Like, you get some nice real practical explosions. Again, Sean Patrick Flannery, I've seen other stuff. He was on the TV show The Dead Zone with Anthony Michael Hall. He was in this film with Lou Diamond Phillips and a Lone Hero or something like that. I remember it being a pretty decent direct-to-video movie. It was that title or similar to it. Let's say Sean Patrick Flannery does fine. It just, there's only one indie, so it's one of those things that just bugs me. Also, the music was fine, but like they can't use it or don't use the John Williams theme in music, but they do sort of a side version of it. So it sounds in the same vein, but just not as good. You know, they try to incorporate a little bit of referencing something for the future. Like in this, Paul Freeman getting to the point of how important it is that sometimes you have to make it up as you go along. Which, of course, in Raiders of the Lost Ark, he says, "You got a plan? No, I'll make it up as I go along." Like, that's in Raiders of the Lost Ark. So, okay, this is where he got that from. It was from Paul Freeman. And Indy trying to learn to be a bit more spontaneous. So that was a bit interesting. Yeah, there's one scene that seemed goofy at first, because Indy goes, "Wait a minute, we're risking our lives for toilet paper?" And then you find out, well, I guess for toilet paper, like, they would use whatever documents they had, so they could actually find some important information even within these products. I mean, it still had the look of a TV movie, TV show, so it couldn't be as expansive with the action and spectacle. Other than, a couple of decent explosions and such. It's just that I don't really get much of a sense of the other men. So, like, there's a guy on the tightrope. It's not Indy. It's not Paul Freeman. So, why should I care? I mean, I know it's one of the other heroes, but I barely know the guy on the tightrope. Barely know anything about him. Barely know anything about the guy's personality. So, okay, I'm just marveling a stuntman doing this instead of worrying or thinking about the character or the person or the actor. I mean, of course, I don't want the actor to get hurt. It's just, or the stuntman to get hurt. But it's just like I don't know anything about this character, or barely anything. But again, the idea of this train that they're looking for, this giant cannon, the idea of it being hidden and how they find out, I thought that was kind of interesting. And that's really what the title suggests. And I thought it was going to be like a two-parter episode. This is before I learned more about the specifics of the show. So I'm like, okay, the first part is going to be them getting the train. Then the second part is going to be thrilling suspense of them keeping the train. But no, that wasn't the case. It was, they're ready to blow up the train, but the explosives fuck up. Then they're really ready to do this, but then they disconnect cars, but then that screws up, so they connect the cars again. So there's a lot of stuff they're doing ends up not working, but ultimately they get the job done. And Indy's able to drive the train a bit because he knows, which I didn't know he knew about trains, and he was fluent in German. They make that distinction. I'm like, is Indiana Jones fluent in German? Because I remember Raiders of the Lost Ark, the guy's talking to him, and he's like, and then he tits the guy and takes his hat. So I'm like, well, why didn't Indy? Well, because Raiders of the Lost Ark was made decades before this, but I'm like, why didn't Indy respond in German? Like in retrospect, in continuity. When the guy's talking, why is Indy being silent, just kneeing him and taking the hat? Like the way it made it look like in Raiders was that he didn't know German. And even when he met Adolf Hitler in Last Crusade, did he speak German to Hitler? I just know he had the book and like didn't say anything. I figured, oh, he didn't say anything because he didn't know German that much. But here, one of the reasons they take him in is because he says he is fluent in German. And maybe that's something he lost track of later, or and just in the movies he just decided not to do it. I mean, maybe he spoke German Last Crusade, but that's why when he fucks up the one guy, he goes, no ticket. He didn't say in German to the people there. He just says, no ticket. But I don't know. As for knowing about trains, I guess he wanted to learn a bit more after what happened Last Crusade with the lion and the whip and all that stuff. Now the second part, but I could do and somewhat enjoy the first part. The second part is pretty much just another mission, and they find this female courier, and they shoot her saddle, they tie her up, they find this camp, and then Indy and Remy, his buddies, joining them this time, and they find out that they're actually part of this ploy to kidnap this officer, and they find out later. So they get caught, but it's part of the plan, and then they escape. But then Indy and Remy have the prisoner, and they accidentally get into a hot air balloon. And then, like, Paul Freeman's guys, you don't see them until the very end of the episode. So it's pretty much... Granted, this is where it got a bit of a faster pace in that second part, where for a TV show, there's some decent bits with Indy having to patch up the hot air balloon because it's been shot at, and then they're shot at more by a plane, and Indy shooting at the plane with this big heavy machine gun, which was pretty cool. Then at one point the prisoner tries to get him, but Indy flips him over. At one point there's these animals, which of course you're not going to have a lot of the people with the animals. That'd be too dangerous. But the editing was fine enough to try to make us believe in that. Then they get chased by natives. So it's like one after the other, after the other, after the other, until ultimately, spoiler alert, they're at a standstill, and pretty much they let the prisoner go, who's like a colonel. I'm like, well, fuck, that means all this was pointless? Like, this whole second act of this film, I mean, it probably would have been just better to watch just the train episode than as these two put together, because the second part it comes off as pointless. Like, the whole plan is to kidnap this colonel, and then they let the colonel go so that they both, everyone can survive. And like I said, Paul Freeman's men disappear until the very, very end of the episode, which was a shame, because it would have been nice to try to learn more about some of these characters, Paul Freeman and the others. But I mean, there is some decent bits of action, like they're in the hot air balloon and it's going, and they're shooting and punching at the bad guys, and then you see that's going off a cliff and they're floating by, and again Andy trying to patch it up so it doesn't. Like I say, Sean Patrick Flannery does fine, but he's definitely no patch on Harrison Ford. Like, the music again is trying to be a somewhat approximation of John Williams type of score, so it's not a bad musical score, but that's what I mean. It's kind of what I expected, where it's not bad, it's interesting to watch. I can see why this found a fan base, but I'm much more a fan of the first four. I know there's some people who go, this is so much better than Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. I disagree. I'd much rather watch Kingdom of the Crystal Skull than this. Did I think this was bad? No. The production value and some of the action scenes, the chase scenes, pretty decent for TV work. But at the same time, it did feel like a TV show as well. Obviously so. Like I said, Remy I didn't care for as a side character. Paul Freeman, and especially his buddies, I wish we got to learn a bit more about them. Like, maybe the basics, but maybe a bit more development. I would prefer the Phantom Train of Doom itself as a full-fledged movie. That way, maybe you take what budget you have for this other hot air balloon thing and put into that, and flourish the style a bit more, build up a bit more of the other characters, spend a bit more on the train, make that a bit bigger. You can even incorporate some of the stuff here where Paul Freeman and Indy are like shooting and hot air balloon nearby, and then they get back on the train. And anyway, I'm just spitballing. But yeah, not bad at all, but not something I would ever see again. So with that said, as my stomach keeps rumbling, I apologize for that. We will see you guys later. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.